Kos, and we're at the She to People Summit. I'd love to hear more about like your journey as a media person, right? How did that start, and how has it been the way that you've how has it been related to your activism?
I started to recognize that media was a vehicle of mobilization because there are many gatekeepers who get to decide whose story is worthy of being told and whose story isn't. And so many of the people who are telling stories about trans people, who are telling stories about Black women, who are telling stories about the immigrant experience, don't have a full understanding of what those narratives entail. And so I believe that media is an opportunity for us to tell our stories because no one can tell it better than we can. And it's also an opportunity to help those further along the margins of society feel seen and heard.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd love to hear some about your personal story in terms of when did you first realize your political power?
Yeah, I think it was when it was taken away from me. When you don't know what you have until you don't have it. And there were so many people that told me that I didn't deserve to be able to contribute to the political space because I'm too young, I'm a baby, or because, right now it's about cis Black women. So, trans people are coming, but we need to all get behind this for right now. People that were telling me because of my story around drugs and survival sex work and, navigating mental health, homelessness, that I should kind of keep those things to myself so I can come up with this packaged, idea of who I am. And so really what it is that I feel we're doing ourselves a huge disservice if we're fighting for women to hold space if we don't get to show up as who we fully are.
Yes.
And so that was when I started getting more involved in media so that I could actually get that message out.
What was it like? First, I think the first thing I would like to say is, what can cisgender people do to do the right thing and support trans people and get the real stories out there done? What should people be doing? A lot of people have excuses saying, oh, well, we can't find them, but I don't believe that.
Well, not only are we around, but also be intentional about promoting us to positions of leadership, because the same discussion that we're having around Black and brown women, we're having that same discussion in the trans community. How are we bringing us to the table, not only so that we can have a voice, but so that we can have the economic empowerment to match? Because we're not looking for anyone to save us. We're looking for the resources to save ourselves. And so for those young trans children, we want them to be able to see that they can be, do, and accomplish anything in their lives that they want to. And the only way they're going to see that is if we're given those opportunities to thrive in those spaces.
Speaking of thriving in different spaces, I know you ran for elected office. I would love to hear about what was the most surprising part of it, running, especially as a Black trans woman.
Well, I think the most surprising thing was the lack of intersectionality in feminist spaces and even within the Black establishment, because even in Black politics, the church is a huge anchor for that. So there definitely wasn't a separation of church and state. So many people, they were making decisions based off of faith-based ideology. And that's not a bad thing. It's really just about expanding your understanding of community and faith-based love and support and inclusion. And it was also interesting because no one really wanted to talk about the issues. Everyone wanted to talk about the things that sound good so that they could get their campaigns financed. And so we're talking about voter suppression, but we aren't actually talking to the people whose votes count the most. We're still pandering to this small percentage of politicians and electeds and the people who fund them. And there's over 85% of our communities who aren't voting, and it's because they don't see themselves reflected in these issues. So we don't want to talk about homelessness. We don't want to talk about drug addiction. We don't want to talk about mass incarceration and recidivism. We don't want to talk about affordable housing. We don't want to talk about rape culture and the way that it shows up not just in our communities but in corporate spaces and our learning institutions. And I was willing to pull the covers off of things that people really didn't have answers for, so it was a lot easier to shut me down, because that way we don't have to address it. And I believe that we can't heal what we don't reveal. And for too long, we've been giving people the reins of leadership and not holding them accountable for what these positions are all about and what their social responsibility is.
One last question. I'd love to hear, you've clearly learned a lot in this journey, and if you could give, a younger version of yourself any advice, what would you tell her?
You are valid. Your experiences are valid. Your feelings are valid. Your presence is valid. Do not shrink yourself. You should not have to shrink your blackness, your brownness, your queerness, your disabilities, your shortcomings, because everything that you've been through is what's ultimately going to make you. And those things that you may see as rendering you broken are going to be the things that yield strength.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Yes.